iDS Talks is a podcast dedicated to helping corporations and law firms find new and effective ways to leverage data, giving them a decisive advantage both in and out of the courtroom.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of iDS Talks. My name is Jonathan Sachs, Chief Revenue Officer at iDS, and I'm joined today by Jonathan Karchmer, Associate Director in our Forensics Group out of iDS's Costa Mesa, California office. We're here today to talk about the role of digital forensics in modern legal battles. Welcome, Jonathan.
Thanks. Happy to be here.
For our listeners, this Jonathan is the original, the OG Jonathan here at iDS. You've graciously let me be referred to as Jonathan, although it seems like it's Sachs more than anything. So if I slip in and call you JK, so our listeners understand kind of what happens here. But I'm going to try to stick to the Jonathan. Let's confuse the listeners. Two Jonathans. It'll be perfect.
Sounds good.
All right. So let's jump right into it. Forensics is one of these topics that I geek out about a little bit. I find it really interesting what you and our colleagues do when they're looking at data and analyzing it after imaging it. It's incredible. But let's start off with, I think, a baseline understanding. In terms of forensics, correct me if I'm wrong, two ways we can look at it. The traditional, I need to preserve something, I need to collect it, it needs to be processed for review. And the, I need to preserve something, I need to capture it, collect it, and then I need to analyze it to determine what someone may or may not have done. Is that fair?
Absolutely. I talk with clients frequently about their, quote, needing forensics. And my follow-up question is usually, okay, so let's talk more about that. Because sometimes clients do think that forensics may be limited to that collection. And it's certainly a important piece of the puzzle. Both types of those cases you mentioned, they deal with preservation on the onset. You have to get the data first. You have to preserve it the right way. And for some folks, that's all forensics means, but that's fine. Forensics is also that analysis, that investigation. What occurred on this system? What activity occurred on this or that device? What was somebody doing with a laptop or a phone? I think digital forensics encompasses the whole thing, from preservation to investigation if it's needed.
Great. So I think that's a terrific foundation for the first question, which is, how has the landscape of digital forensics evolved over the years, and what significant advancements have been made to adapt to the complexities of today's legal cases?
Wow. That's a
long question. Yeah, and it's packed with a lot.
Well, I think a lot about when I got started over 20-ish years ago. Digital forensics was much more focused on data recovery. It was much more focused on what deleted stuff we might be able to recover, less so on activity, what occurred on the system. And the simple reason was the operating systems then just didn't track as much information as they do today. Today, it's the shift from 20 years ago to today is mind-blowing. There's so much more information we can get. We can get it a lot faster as well, but there's so much more detail we have now about what activity occurred on a system, whether that was the user of the system, or sometimes maybe it's an attacker doing something to a remote system. That's something I think quite a lot about. That shift has been pretty extreme over 20 years. So the follow-up to that was what advancements have been made?
Yeah, significant advancements. I feel like this is one of those questions, Jonathan, where 10 years ago, the advancements may have not been as frequent. And now with the advancement of technology, operating systems changing, frankly, look, every time there's a new security flaw that's identified, a new operating system comes out, and then that makes the life of a forensicator super complicated.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I'm thinking now about how hard drives used to be, just a few gigabytes in size. And today I was thinking about how far we've come. Some of the tech changes have been useful. I think it helped us adapt to, today's cases and our data capacities. The changes in hardware obviously are I think help and hurt us depending on how you want to look at it, right? We have faster media today. We have flash drives today, but now the capacities of those things are also skyrocketing. So it's a constant one-upping, I think, of, getting an advantage and maybe having it taken away.
Sure.
But those are some of the things I'm thinking about.
Okay. So people understand that the duty preserve has existed forever. That included, well, back in 2006, in terms of production of data and documents, it included electronically stored information. We've just talked about how technology has changed and changes rapidly, both for better and worse. So in what ways do digital forensic experts like yourself and like the team here at iDS, in what ways do they assist legal teams in gathering and analyzing this digital evidence?
Yeah, we assist now with, I think, more than we ever used to in the past. I think, going back again 20 years, it was 20 years ago, all we had to deal with were, laptops and desktops and maybe servers. And today it is those things and more, right? Now we have the cloud, where we can have documents and emails in the cloud. Now we have mobile devices, we have text messaging and activity databases on those devices to tell us what's been going on there. I would say that we assist those legal teams by, collecting and preserving all types of data, whether it's from a computer, from a phone, from a server, from the cloud, from log files. I think if any storage media is out there, if any log file format is there, that's usually something we can work with our clients to preserve in a defensible way, in a complete way, and hopefully give them some information that lends some insight to whatever case they're working on.
Yeah. So follow-up question to that. What challenges, what are the top 2 or 3 or most frequent 2 or 3 challenges that teams may encounter during the process?
Great question. I think this isn't always on the forefront of the legal team's mind. Sometimes assumptions are made about the ease of access to certain information, or whether or not an organization they're working with might have some kind of BYOD, people bringing their own device to the organization that they just didn't know about until their case came along. So we've had cases in the past where the case team got fired up, they got ready to go, they gave us, kind of a statement of work, but it felt like the brakes were slammed on in an instant because we found a lot of the users in that case happened to be Mac computer users. And it just turned out that the IT department in some organizations maybe don't manage those devices, or they don't put admin credentials on those devices. And, lo and behold, it turned out that these devices were really not under the control of the IT department as they were assumed to be. So I think sometimes that can be a surprise for clients on new cases. And we see things like that from time to time.
Yeah. I would say, based on my experience, logistics is becoming a challenge.
Absolutely.
Increase in remote data collections, and the custodian, the person whose phone it is or whose laptop it is, has to be available and needs to be able to, do something with that device, but has to wait. And so logistics, and I thought about that when you talked about the brakes being put on from the hardware and admin perspective. Another little point.
Absolutely. We sometimes will rush to, get collection equipment out to a client, or even shipping ourselves, or we'll get a resource out to a client only to find out that maybe a user's not as available as believed, or the device isn't available. It happens quite a bit on remote collections from time to time as well, where the case team thinks and understands that this device is priority, but whoever received the kit may have not gotten the same message. Sometimes that can happen. Even when we do get devices shipped to us, there's always kind of a top level approach we take with the device, just to make sure the device we received is actually the same device everybody thinks it is.
Okay.
Sometimes we'll get a device and we're told it was used by, Joe or Jane, but part of our process too is to kind of do a first pass and say, well, okay, it looks like the system was put into use, maybe 2 weeks ago. Are we sure? Are we sure this is the right system? Or maybe it is the right system and something happened to it prior to our getting it. All of those things are things we have to keep an eye out for.
Yeah, you made reference to our process. I think it's really important to our listeners to understand that a key element of this is having a process in place to apply as you're going through the forensics project. It's something, frankly, that if you're working with any forensic expert out there, I think exploring and understanding first that there is a process, and even at a high level what that process is a key part of this.
Absolutely. We've inherited, I'll say, a few cases where maybe another consultant, did a forensic exam, but they didn't maybe think to ask whether or not it was the right computer, or were they really, ticking those boxes and taking that into consideration. We like to kind of address those questions right up front. It doesn't matter what kind of case it is. There are certain things that we look for on a device just to, dot the I's, cross the T's, make sure everyone's on the same sheet of music.
Yep. Now, you mentioned messages, I think messages in the cloud context, perhaps. And I've actually been on a podcast with our colleague, Tim Latulip, where we talked about WhatsApp data and whether, that it doesn't really exist on the phone. It exists in the cloud. And so someone says, I don't have my phone, you can still get the messages. I want to talk to you, though, in a slightly different context. Because I think with the increasing prevalence of encrypted messaging and messaging apps and privacy concerns, how do legal professionals navigate obtaining digital evidence while still respecting individuals' privacy rights?
That's another great question.
That's why I'm moderating the podcast. I have a good question. We're here. Yeah. Okay. Go ahead. Sorry. Answer this great question.
No, I think on one hand, fortunately, luckily, many of the devices that we're working with are obviously they're company issued, or we have the blessing from the parties involved to work with these devices, preserve data, analyze data, do whatever we're doing. And I think there are those cases from time to time where parties are asked to preserve devices, and some do and some don't. But I think for the most part, I guess what I'm thinking is that we do get those permissions a lot of the time. Now, that said, we also work under conditions where there's a protocol in place to help protect people's privacy and people's information. So we've helped draft some of these protocols sometimes that dictate how the work is going to be done, what exactly it is we're going to be looking at. And I get into these conversations with clients and prospective clients quite a bit, just to let them know that, part of the process, the collection process and the analysis and what we're doing, a lot of this is really machine driven. Right. And we're given very specific criteria most of the time, where we have search terms, we have date parameters, where we're told to look for very specific things. And really none of us have the time or the budget or the inclination to just go looking at people's cat pictures or things like that. We just, that just doesn't enter into it, right? We're pretty focused on the question at hand, applying search terms, letting the machines, do their part, and then coming up with that maybe subset of data for for review. So I think we're sensitive to it too. It's just because we all have data, we all have phones, and we all have cloud accounts. So yeah, there's no snooping or anything like that going on. We have to be focused on what it is we're doing on from a case to case process.
Yeah, and you mentioned the protocols. I think that's important.
Yeah.
And I think in some cases it's not just explaining to counsel what you're going to be doing, but it's being on with the actual custodian with that explanation. Taking the extra couple of minutes can make them feel a little more at ease.
Absolutely. And in some cases, we've, that parties decided the data was extra sensitive. We've even, limited the conditions under which either data was going to be preserved or even analyzed. We've had any kind of number of different situations like remote analysis workstations kind of set up, or even escrow situations set up where maybe the data is protected by a password. One party has the data, one party has the password. So we can't even do analysis until all the parties are together in whatever format was decided. There's a lot of different ways to get the work done, but those are just some examples that come to mind.
Yeah. I think it would be helpful to those listening if we can give them perhaps a specific example where let's call it some notable project, but protect the name of the innocent or guilty or all of the above. But let's a project where digital forensics actually played what I would say could be a crucial role in determining the outcome of the case.
Sure. We work on quite a few, we call them employee risk assessments, or ERAs. And this is the type of forensic investigation that's kind of the internal threat focus. What was the employee doing with company issued devices? Well, oftentimes that is the situation is such where people are wondering if a former employee might have taken something that they shouldn't have. And sometimes this activity is, towards the end of that person's tenure at an organization. So the focus of these ERAs is really about what we call data exfiltration or data copying. And sometimes our clients have reason to believe that something was taken or printed or copied or what have you. And of course, we'll use any intel we can get, but we'll also look at the devices themselves to kind of see what they say. I guess I'm thinking of a case now where we had some data that was copied to USB drives. That continues to be sort of the easiest way for people to copy a lot of data. But as time goes on, though, USB devices and things are getting locked down in more organizations. So if a user wants to take things with them, sometimes their options have to change. We did have a case where there was some USB usage that was understood, and the consultant who was initially working on the case found some sign of possible data exfiltration having to do with the web. And iDS got involved because it looked like testimony was going to be needed on this case. We were able to, take their partial findings and kind of review the analysis again. And we did find, in fact, that, yes, in addition to one USB drive being used, there was some pretty large outbound data transfers over the network. So we were able to kind of pull information from some different artifacts to tell a more complete story. This user accessed a file sharing program and uploaded quite a bit of data over several hours. And they were trying to install different programs and remove different programs from their computer. But yeah, oftentimes forensics can help really tell a more detailed story of how a device was used and what was happening.
Yeah, and the employee risk assessments that you referenced, the ERAs, I find them really interesting. It's, you aren't always going to find that your employee was a bad employee, a bad actor. And many times clients come to us because they just need to find out. There's some reason to suspect maybe they did And if we find that there isn't enough evidence to suggest it, then fine. And sometimes it's, there's some smoke here. You need to dig. You need to dig deeper. That's where I think the strength of our bench really helps out in terms of that deeper analysis of what's going on, because there are some shady people out there, man. I'll just say it.
Well, sometimes there's smoke and sometimes there's not. But I think either way, right, we're able to take the data and really either put them at ease or maybe confirm their fears. We have had some clients in the past that just started. They basically started having meetings to decide whether or not this departed employee's laptop should be shipped to iDS, yes or no. And for a while there, they were, based on information they had and intelligence they gathered and what people were hearing, they would just start, sending us laptops without engaging us first because they knew they were going to call iDS to have that, thumbs up, thumbs down, either way. Was this employee at risk or maybe not? And it's one or the other.
Good stuff. So let me ask you one last question. Going to have you put your wizard hat to look into the future. As technology continues to advance at the rapid pace we've already talked about, and it will even speed up more, what do you foresee as the future trends and challenges, or at least a couple of trends and challenges in digital forensics, particularly in relation to forensics' role in legal proceedings?
Wow. Okay. I'll try to take that piece by piece. The challenges I see, I think we see them now. Encryption is always an issue if we're talking about. Doesn't matter if we're talking about phones or PCs or Macs. So I think it's very important for organizations again to really know what they have. Know what they're giving employees, know what they're procuring, but also being able to document and control the security controls on those devices, making sure that if there is an investigation that the company, the IT team can quickly find a decryption key or have admin credentials to get access to the data that we need access to. I think that sort of level of oversight is something I think is definitely going to be important. The other challenges, storage media and sizes, they're just getting enormous. So it's taking a little bit longer over time for us to get a good collection of an iPhone or do a complete forensic image of a desktop drive that's, I don't know how many terabytes in size we have now. Those are definitely challenges as well. It's something that for, legal teams and everyone in between to be aware of that, how things are today, it's definitely not going to be how things are tomorrow. So we'll see what we can do. We'll try to roll with the punches.
I like it. I think that's really insightful. Well, I want to thank you, Jonathan, for joining me today. I'd also like to thank our regular subscribers and those that may be first-time listeners for spending time with us. If you'd like to learn more about iDS or want to subscribe to our iDS Talks podcast, you can visit idsinc.com or go wherever you normally get your podcasts from. Thank you again for joining us, and I look forward to talking more about data with you on our next edition of iDS Talks.